This is an ABC News special report. Trump-Putin Summit. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good afternoon. Just before 3 p.m. here in the East, we're coming back on the air. The eyes of the world now locked on Anchorage, Alaska, where President Trump landed a short time ago. And news just moments ago, Vladimir Putin has now arrived for this high-stakes summit. Let's take a look at live pictures there from Anchorage, Alaska. This summit obviously will involve Russia's war in Ukraine, the future of Ukraine itself quite possibly hanging in the balance over what unfolds during the next several hours. You can see Vladimir Putin arriving on this plane just moments ago at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. We know that Air Force One arrived within the last 30 minutes or so. We were on the air for that and talked you through what's expected to play out here. You can see there the stairs have been aligned with the door there in Air Force One. President Trump expected to come down those stairs once Vladimir Putin is ready to deplane as well. There is literally a red carpet that's been rolled out not far from Air Force One. It's expected that both leaders will greet one another on that carpet. And as we pointed out earlier while we were on the air, this is significant, obviously, for a number of reasons. High stakes. Those were words used by President Trump himself on the way to this summit. But we also have not seen an American president and Vladimir Putin meeting in a format like this for a summit on American soil in more than a decade. That in and of itself is significant here. Obviously, the future of Ukraine will be discussed. Vladimir Putin making it clear in the last 24 hours that he has other items on the agenda, including the economy, and whether or not any sort of ties can be strengthened between Russia and the U.S. As you know, in recent weeks, President Trump had threatened severe sanctions against Russia to try to move up any kind of timeline for a possible ceasefire. Those sanctions were never brought to bear, and instead what we're now witnessing is a summit, a remarkable moment. There have been many who have questioned whether or not giving Vladimir Putin a moment on the world stage and on American soil like this was the right move. Others will say nothing has worked so far. And President Trump himself has acknowledged that this is a gamble. He said in the last 24 hours, there's a 25% chance that this could fail. And again, on Air Force One, a short time ago, saying he could walk from this if the summit doesn't go well. They are expected to meet together. As I mentioned earlier while we were on the air, this is going to be a 3-on-3 meeting is what they're calling it, which essentially means President Trump will be there with two of his high-level team members, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who of course traveled to Russia not long ago and helped make this summit happen. Hastily arranged, actually, after Witkoff's meeting in Russia. The Russian delegation saying Witkoff gave signals that were encouraging, and they thought they should move forward with this summit. Also in the room, in addition to President Trump, Steve Witkoff, will be Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Again, 3 people in the room for the U.S., 3 in the room for the Russian delegation. Obviously, Vladimir Putin will be central to this summit between Putin and Trump, but there will be others in the room along with Vladimir Putin as well. Following the summit itself, there's expected to be some sort of a working lunch, a working session with larger delegations from both countries. And then it's the plan later this afternoon, early this evening, to hold a joint press conference in front of the world. Of course, we'll carry it live here on ABC News, where both leaders will be asked, has there been any progress here in coming to terms on a ceasefire to at least halt the fighting in Ukraine now, which has lasted more than 3 years since the Russian invasion, so that President Zelensky, so that Ukraine can be brought into these discussions themselves to talk about the future of Ukraine. President Trump has talked in recent days about a land swap. That's the term he used, some sort of territorial exchange between Russia and Ukraine, but he also indicated that would have to be negotiated between Russia and Ukraine themselves. Mary Bruce, our chief White House correspondent, watching this split screen right along with us. A remarkable moment, Mary, and as we pointed out here, President Trump has acknowledged this is in fact a gamble.
It is a huge gamble, David, and it is remarkable when you see these images, this really historic split screen, and to think the moment that Vladimir Putin's plane touched down, that was the moment that the isolation that he has faced from the West for the last 3.5 years ruptured. Instead of being rebuffed by American presidents and European leaders, here the president of Russia is now being welcomed. That red carpet literally rolled out to meet face to face with President Trump. And while the president, who famously said that he could end this war in 24 hours, now concedes this is proving to be more difficult than he thought. But he has been confident that he has a unique ability to convince Vladimir Putin to try and make some kind of progress here today. He says he wants that ceasefire, but he also was blunt with reporters on Air Force One today when asked, what does success look like? He said, I really can't tell you that. Of course, Vladimir Putin also setting some expectations. He's been heaping lots of praise and flattery on President Trump ahead of this meeting. He is well aware of the power of this image that you are about to see, something that we have not seen in many years, David, as you note. The Russian leader about to shake hands with the American president on American soil, no less.
Our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, with us here for our coverage. She's, of course, live from Anchorage, Alaska, along with Martha Raddatz, Rachel Scott, Ian Pannell, live in Kyiv, Ukraine. We are across the world for this historic summit here, playing out this afternoon in front of the world. Mary mentioned that President Trump did take questions on Air Force One on the way to Anchorage, Alaska, and he was asked what will make success of this summit today. And he said, there's nothing set in stone, the president said. He said, I want certain things. I want to see a ceasefire. Europe's not telling me what to do, but they're going to be involved in the process as well as Zelensky. I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. That from the president on board Air Force One on the way to Anchorage, Alaska. But the president himself has said the ceasefire certainly is not guaranteed. Coming out of this summit today, that is his hope for what he's able to achieve. He has indicated already that what he would like to see next is a second summit. That would include Putin and Zelensky and President Trump himself if they wanted him there as well. That's been his indication the last 24 to 48 hours. Again, President Trump on Air Force One right now. We're told he was meeting with senators from the state of Alaska while he awaited the arrival of Vladimir Putin. And as you can see, the Russian plane there, the stairs have been brought to the doorway of the Russian plane as well. A remarkable moment. And again, you cannot underscore the stakes here, not only because we haven't seen a summit like this in more than a decade on U.S. soil welcoming Vladimir Putin, but also given what we have witnessed, the world has witnessed really for more than 3 years now, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the countless lives lost on both the Ukrainian side and the Russian side, and the fighting that is still underway as we come on the air in the last 24 hours. These last few weeks this summer, Russia has had a significant impact in that eastern region of Ukraine. President Zelensky, in addressing the Ukrainian people leading up to this summit, pointing out that civilians had been caught in the crossfire again in just the last 24 hours, saying in so many words that the Russian military action that continues leading right up to the moments of this summit, he believes is an indication stronger than any words, any promise of a potential ceasefire coming out of this. In fact, in meeting with European leaders and in talking with President Trump this week, President Zelensky said he believes that Vladimir Putin is bluffing here. We will have to wait and see what comes of this summit. Vladimir Putin and the Russian delegation indicating even before this summit that while the future of Ukraine and any potential ceasefire is on the agenda, that they have other things they want to discuss with President Trump. Our chief global affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz, on the ground there in Anchorage, Alaska, with me here this afternoon. And Martha, there has been a lot of critique about whether or not to hold this summit, whether to invite Vladimir Putin to American soil. As we heard John Karl report earlier, many in the White House will say nothing has worked so far, that this was a gamble worth taking. Of course, we won't know until what we see come out of this on the other side. But it's hard to believe that this is not what Vladimir Putin at least would want at this moment, to be welcomed on American soil.
Exactly, David. And with that red carpet rolled out, it is true. Nothing has worked before, working towards a ceasefire in the Biden administration. But we'll see whether President Trump can make any progress, because you have to remember, of course, that it was Putin who set the deal here today. He did not want Volodymyr Zelensky there. President Trump agreed to that. President Trump had originally wanted that trilateral meeting. It did not happen. President Trump is going to push him for one soon, but whether or not we'll see that come out of this meeting remains to be seen. President Zelensky was, of course, deeply concerned once they accepted a meeting just between Trump and Putin. And remember, Ukraine is at the center of this. This is Zelensky's country, and he is not here. And in fact, in just the last couple of days, Dmitry Peskov, who is a spokesperson for Vladimir Putin, was asked whether Zelensky's position in this war would be, or what he wants in these negotiations, would be discussed. And Peskov said, no, it won't be. So that puts him out of the picture, except for what President Trump says in those meetings. He is in some ways the voice of Zelensky in these meetings. As we said earlier, David, he will call Zelensky as soon as these meetings are finished to see what, if any, progress is made. But this indeed is a gamble. It is a gamble, but nothing has worked in the past. So he was willing to take this step to see if they could make progress, to see if they could get a ceasefire. Zelensky says he wants a ceasefire before further negotiations. So if they come out and there's no ceasefire, will Zelensky even come to any meetings in the future, David?
Will he come to any meetings in the future? And what will President Trump do, given the threat of sanctions in recent weeks? We are seeing some movement there. President Trump there at the top of the stairs, Air Force One. Giving his trademark fist bump there at the top of the stairs. Now coming down the stairs, and we expect to see Vladimir Putin at about the same time emerge from the plane there as well. Again, you're watching ABC News live coverage of this historic summit. This is Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska. Vladimir Putin just now emerging from the plane there and coming down the stairs. And again, we have not seen a summit, a meeting of this magnitude on American soil in more than a decade between an American president and Vladimir Putin. And in fact, the West, including the United States and Europe, had not communicated in person with Putin since the invasion of Ukraine more than 3 years ago. That war raging on, the fighting even in the last 24 hours. President Trump has made it very clear what he wants here is an immediate ceasefire. When asked if that's what he will get, the president has been very honest in these last couple of days, saying, I don't know what I'll get. He gave it a 25% chance of failure, but also said that he believes Vladimir Putin wants to make a deal here, that he wants to negotiate. The president was asked on his way on Air Force One, you've had a lot of phone calls with Putin, so what's the difference in a face-to-face and an in-person meeting? The president saying, no difference. He's a smart guy. He's been doing it for a long time. We get along. There's a good respect level on both sides, that he believes something will come of this. The president waiting there on the red carpet for Vladimir Putin. Applauding there as Vladimir Putin approaches the President of the United States. Of course, we remember the summit between these two leaders during President Trump's first term in Helsinki. They met, and now they meet again right here. The eyes of the world on this moment, particularly because Ukraine, the future of Ukraine, the future of that conflict, the war that has taken so many lives on both sides of the conflict, hangs in the balance here. We have been told that President Trump and Vladimir Putin will meet together. They will each have two high-level aides from their cabinets, their administrations in the room as well. So there'll be 6 people in the room, 3 and 3. Steve Witkoff, and there you see a flyover, the B-2 flyover. That was expected. You can can see the F-22s there and some of the cutaways from the cameras lining that red carpet. And there you have it. Obviously, you know what a photo op is, and that's the photo op. Still cameras there greeting these two leaders. That handshake now will be seen around the world, if not on live television, moments later across social media. You can hear the reporters trying.
President, how can the U.S. trust your word? Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Let's go. Let's go around the world. Come on, guys.
The question was, how can the U.S. trust your word? That question obviously posed to Vladimir Putin. Obviously, they did not engage. There will be a motorcade now that unfolds on their way to this summit. They are expected to show us at some point the two leaders meeting in that initial summit. What comes after that summit, we're told, is what they're calling a working lunch, a working session of some sort, during which there would be a larger delegation from both Russia and the United States, hammering out a number of issues here. But the president saying on his way to Anchorage that what he wants today, what he wants coming out of this summit, is a ceasefire. He wants it rapidly. He acknowledges, I don't know if I'm going to see it today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. Ian Pannell, our chief foreign correspondent, he's live for us from Kyiv, Ukraine. And as we look at these two world leaders, we cannot forget, and you've interviewed them countless times, and so have I, when we brought the broadcast to Ukraine, the Ukrainian families who've been caught in the middle of all of this, who've wondered about the future of their country. Even the Ukrainians watching right here in America, many of whom relocated to Alaska, of all places, now watching Vladimir Putin arrive, President Trump's attempts to try to get a ceasefire unfold. We cannot forget the Ukrainian people caught in the middle here.
Yeah, very right, David. I mean, Ukrainians are watching, Ukrainians are hoping, but I think if you ask many people what they think of these images that we're looking at now, they will tell you that they feel sick to their stomach. Vladimir Putin is a man who has been charged with war crimes. His troops have been accused of carrying out sexual abuse, of murder, of occupying 20% of Ukrainian land, of wantonly destroying territory, of driving millions from their homes, of killing tens of thousands of people. And so, yes, they will not be happy.
Ian Pannell with us for our coverage. That's a remarkable scene right there. Vladimir Putin waving from inside the beast, as we call it, inside the President of the United States motorcade. John Carl, our chief Washington correspondent, watching this unfold, also with us here today. A remarkable moment, John, for Vladimir Putin to get into the car with the American president. Obviously a very sensitive vehicle protecting the President of the United States. They will travel now to this summit together, it would appear.
I mean, Donald Trump, some will question whether he knows statecraft. He does, David, know stagecraft. That was a made-for-television moment, seeing him walk down one red carpet, greeting Putin, walking down another red carpet, and then getting into the presidential limo. There have been so many critics of this summit over the past several days saying, how could Donald Trump welcome Vladimir Putin to American soil? How could he give him the honor of meeting with an American president? They will no doubt have a similar reaction when they see that picture of a smiling Vladimir Putin in the seat there next to the president in the presidential limo. I can tell you this, though, Donald Trump sees it entirely differently. He sees this as he has brought the Russian president to American soil. This is a home game for Donald Trump. He has brought him to American land. He has done that flyover of the B-2 bomber, just like the B-2 bombers that took out the air campaign against the Iranian nuclear facility, walking by American firepower and getting into the most sensitive personal vehicle in America, the presidential limousine, and coming into that limousine. Donald Trump sees this as, you know, you're on my turf here. I'm the president. I'm effectively the world leader, and let's go. It's just the stagecraft again. The stagecraft. It reminds me much of how he handled his meeting, especially the first meeting. He had two of them with Kim Jong-un. Another one. How could you meet with the North Korean dictator? How could you give him the honor of a meeting with the American president? I think Donald Trump looks at the critics and he says, look, I'm taking an entirely different approach. Your approach has failed. I'm confident mine won't.
John Carl here on this wholly different approach from President Trump, the home field advantage, as John alludes to here, hoping that it will help in convincing Vladimir Putin that a ceasefire, and one very shortly, is really the only way to move forward here and to get President Zelensky to that table as well. The rhetoric coming from President Trump in recent weeks when it involves Russia and Vladimir Putin, some of the strongest, harshest, if you will, rhetoric towards Putin that I can remember in covering President Trump, both his first administration and now his second administration. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, because she's in the room where both of those leaders will actually take questions later today. Mary, I'm sure you were struck by this too. Even though the rhetoric had been somewhat threatening, talking about sanctions that would come, instead of the sanctions, they did not come to bear. We're instead seeing a summit on U.S. soil. And it's unmistakable the warmth that you could see between these two leaders. President Trump reaching over, touching Vladimir Putin's hand, shaking it multiple times, and then the smile from Vladimir Putin inside the beast, inside the presidential motorcade, speaking volumes as well.
Yeah, David, seeing Vladimir Putin smile and chuckle isn't something that I think most of the world usually or often sees, and yet that's exactly what we just witnessed as he was sitting there side by side with the president together in the beast. That was a very friendly welcome. They appeared almost chummy, and that is something that President Trump has argued is a strength of his going into this meeting, why he feels he's uniquely positioned to finally be able to potentially make some actual progress here towards ending this war. He knows that they have this, cozy relationship in the past. The president, though, has been increasingly harsh in his language towards Russia and Vladimir Putin. He has said quite bluntly that Putin often says one thing and does another, that often he will say one thing to him on the phone, on their personal conversations, their one-on-one talks, and then, it will prove to be meaningless. That's the word that President Trump has used. The question today, one of many, has been whether the president will bring that sort of tougher stance into this meeting. Now, based on what we just saw here in that very friendly, warm welcome, they seem to be a bit at odds. But the president has been blunt in the last 24 hours, saying, that he feels he can convince Putin. He said, he's not going to mess with me. We will see if that's the case, David.
Interesting, Mary, because the president has used that word. He was pressed on whether or not Vladimir Putin can be trusted going into this summit, if in fact President Trump really believes that there'll be progress here, that a ceasefire is in fact possible. And the president has lowered expectations somewhat as the week went on. You did hear him pressed that if you don't get a ceasefire, will there be consequences? And the president said there would be severe consequences. I would imagine, having covered President Trump for years now, along with you, Mary, and our whole team, that when you roll out a red carpet like this, when you invite Vladimir Putin onto American soil, first time in more than a decade for a meeting of this magnitude, of this stature, for a summit like this, that if President Trump does not get his ceasefire at the end of this summit, that will also be quite remarkable to watch unfold, and what President Trump's steps then would be.
Yeah, it is going to be hard to consider this a win if he doesn't walk away from this with a ceasefire or some kind of clear commitment to have a ceasefire and sometime soon. The president has certainly been, walking this fine line. Look, this is an incredibly delicate dance. And while the president has been sort of optimistic that he can make progress, he has also been downplaying those expectations, saying that this is a feel-out meeting, that he's trying to gauge, where Putin stands on all of this. Putin has also been setting expectations. He has praised the president and the American administration, describing their efforts as quite energetic, as sincere. We also know he's hoping to expand the conversation today beyond Ukraine, perhaps an effort to distract from what President Trump wants to talk about. We know he wants to talk about nuclear arms control and trade and economic cooperation. That's reflected in the aides and the staff that he is bringing here today. So I think President Trump is optimistic, but he is also realistic. And he has said, by his own admission, that he thinks there's a 25% chance that this meeting will fail, and that he may have to walk away. But even walking away would be considered a win, one could certainly argue, for Vladimir Putin.
Mary Bruce, stay with us here. Martha Raddatz, what President Zelensky must be making of these images right now, watching President Trump greet Vladimir Putin on the red carpet and the smiling Russian leader inside the motorcade on the way to this summit. President Zelensky, at least publicly in these last couple of days, has been gracious toward President Trump and hoping that President Trump's effort toward a ceasefire is successful, seeming to acknowledge that nothing has worked until now, and hopefully something will come of this summit, according to Zelensky.
But Zelensky also has been very clear. He thinks America and the allies should put more pressure on Vladimir Putin. He believes that is the key to all of this, put pressure on Vladimir Putin. Now, what happens in this meeting, whether Donald Trump puts pressure on Vladimir Putin, we will see, but this is quite a remarkable beginning with the red carpet and the two men walking together. I can't imagine that Zelensky feels good about that at all, seeing those images. I just talked to him in June, as you know, David, and you've done it yourself as well. He is very unclear exactly what his relationship with Donald Trump is at this point. It has gone back and forth. He was berated by President Trump. Then they had that meeting in the Vatican and seemed to get along very well. I talked to him after that meeting, and he said he really wasn't sure what their relationship is. But everything he says is for his country at this point. He wants that war to end more than anything. David, I'm thinking right now of you and I on the air that first night of the invasion when Vladimir Putin wanted to take all of Ukraine. President Trump is absolutely right about that. And we thought that night that he possibly would take that, but it has been this grinding, horrendous war with so many people lost, David.
And as we look at these pictures, Martha, of these two leaders meeting, President Trump's hand there on the arm of Vladimir Putin, that image being seen by the world. And as I was talking to Ian earlier, Martha, you can't help but to think of the Ukrainian civilians who have been caught in the middle of all of this. We're watching this from a geopolitical perspective, but also the families. And you and I have been to Ukraine so many times, and you know, I don't forget those interviews with the mothers early on who were leaving with their young children, knowing that their husbands were staying behind to fight for the future of Ukraine. And Martha, I remember, you know, one mother, a tearful mother, saying to me, you know, will we be able to come back? And obviously, as a reporter, I did not have the answer to that question for her, but I know that's the question that we all were sort of greeted with as we arrived there to report on what was an invasion that's now lasted, you know, 3 years.
It truly is, and of course Ian is in Kyiv right now. When I was there a couple of months ago, he's experienced this all the time. You go into a bomb shelter. Those air raid warnings are all the time. But you imagine the Ukrainian people doing this night after night after night. I know you have been to those areas where there were mass graves, David. I have too. And you can't help thinking of that today when you see Vladimir Putin get off that plane and walk along that red carpet for this meeting. So there is great hope. We all hope that there is a ceasefire of some sort. But I'm also remember, David, you and I were in Hanoi together. That was indeed a new move on the part of President Trump to meet one-on-one with Kim Jong-un, but that didn't work. That didn't work at all. They ended that meeting within a couple of hours in Hanoi, and that was about nuclear weapons, of course. Nuclear weapons there are even more nuclear weapons in North Korea today, David.
We heard that President Trump, even on the way on Air Force One, acknowledging, Martha, today that he's not sure he'll get a ceasefire out of this. He is hopeful, and he is hopeful he gets this ceasefire coming out of this summit today. I want to bring in Mary Bruce inside the briefing room where both of these leaders are expected after the summit, after then the working session between the two delegations. They're expected to appear together, Mary, to address reporters from all over the world. The question is, what, if anything, will they have achieved that they'll be able to share with the world that will be watching?
David, and I can tell you, in addition to the world, that there are hundreds of reporters here, both the U.S. press corps, the Russian press corps as well, eager to ask President Trump and Vladimir Putin. A rare opportunity, we are hoping to press Vladimir Putin on what progress they are able to make here today. Now, the White House has said it is the plan for them to do this joint press conference. The president a little bit later said that would certainly be nice, but he also said if this doesn't go well, he'll just come out here and face questions on his own and then head home. But it is really remarkable to think that the two of them are now making their way to that 3-on-3 meeting where they will discuss the future of Ukraine.
They are in the room now, we are told. We're expected to see some sort of images coming from that room. Mary Bruce, our thanks to you. Between these two leaders, again, they'll have two top-level people from both administrations in the room with them. 3-on-3, they're calling it, obviously 6 people in the room. And as we await those images, I can tell you that on the way to Anchorage, Alaska, President Trump said that if it doesn't go his way, if it doesn't go well, I would walk. And Mary alludes to that by saying the president has left open the possibility that he would address reporters from around the world on his own if he has to. He said he's going to meet with Putin here in Alaska. I think it's going to work out very well. And if it doesn't, I'm going to head back home real fast. The president has talked in the last 24 to 48 hours, and here we see the pictures right now, inside the summit room there in Anchorage, Alaska, the sprawling joint base, Elmendorf-Richardson. Let's listen to the reporters as they try their best here.
Thank you, press. 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 Everybody get out of the room! Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
Back to the images from before. We're going to re-rack to the beginning of those images because, again, that's the pool feed of what's playing out in the room. You can hear all the reporters trying to get questions in. You can hear some of the advance team is telling folks to get out of the room, meaning the moment is over. Now they work on the summit on their own, the 6 in that room. If we're able to queue up those images again, we'll surely share them with you. But what we've witnessed here today, obviously, is the landing of Air Force One in Anchorage, Alaska, the Russian president arriving a short time thereafter. President Trump coming down those stairs, waiting at the red carpet for Vladimir Putin, a very warm embrace of the Russian leader. We have seen these two leaders at a summit before. You'll remember in Helsinki during the first administration. It was during that summit the president was asked during a joint press conference afterward, much like what they're talking about today, about Russian meddling in the 2016 election. The president, in so many words, said, President Putin said it wasn't Russia. I have no reason not to believe him, essentially putting his faith in Vladimir Putin on that stage in front of the world over his own intelligence community back in Washington. That moment is something that really people on all sides of politics remember well. The question now, all these years later, is will President Trump get what he wants going into this summit? He's given Vladimir Putin, at least initially, what Putin would like, which is a summit on American soil. The White House had said leading up to this that this was in large part Vladimir Putin's idea. They came up with the location to do this in Alaska at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, obviously in Anchorage. They will meet together. And Mary Bruce, we know this is going to be 3-on-3. We did not know exactly who would be in that room. Now we know Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be present as well.
And David, of course, they both bring their own unique strengths to this conversation. Steve Witkoff, the president's special envoy, has been developing this really interesting relationship with the Russians and with Vladimir Putin over recent months. He was instrumental in setting up this summit that we are seeing today that, of course, came together very hastily. And, of course, Marco Rubio, who notably has been, quite harsh and critical of Russia and Vladimir Putin in the past, critical of Putin's invasion. That tone has somewhat softened in the last several months. But it will be interesting to get their perspective. And of course, this is very different from what we saw the last time President Trump and Vladimir Putin met, when it was just them and their translators, a decision that got a lot of pushback and sparked a lot of concern about just getting to the truth of what was actually discussed in that meeting. Now you have a broader, bigger delegation. We were mentioning, of course, that Vladimir Putin has shown an interest in broadening out the conversation beyond just ending the war in Ukraine, possibly to discuss nuclear arms cooperation, economic cooperation, cooperation as well, and trade. So possibly an effort by him to try and distract from what the president wants, which is that ceasefire. That, while he doesn't want to say it, is truly how we are defining, I think, the success of this meeting. Is he able to get progress and any kind of inklings towards that ceasefire? It certainly is what Ukrainian President Zelensky is hoping will come out of this meeting. But the president has also been very blunt that if that doesn't happen, well, he'll just pack up and go home and go back to being, the president of the United States and focusing on everything else he has to focus on. Trump, though, is acutely aware of the power of the images here today. He is also aware of the criticism and the pushback that he has faced, that simply meeting with Putin here today, allowing the world to see these images, is giving Putin a win, but it is a gamble that President Trump is willing to take if it means that he can possibly make some progress towards ending this war, David.
But let me ask you, Mary, you mentioned Steve Witkoff, obviously his trip, and I've been talking about this here, his trip to Russia that led to this summit, the Russian Federation saying, members of the Russian delegation saying Witkoff gave some signals that the U.S. would be open to a summit like this. Now we've seen it somewhat hastily arranged. It came together. It's playing out now in Anchorage, Alaska. You'd have to think that both sides here have been in communication leading up to this moment. President Trump has even said in the last day or two that he looks forward to an additional summit during which President Zelensky would also be a part. He said that today they will talk about the future of Ukraine. We'll talk about the ceasefire. And Air Force One, he was asked about by Rachel Scott, our own Rachel Scott, about land swaps, which is something President Trump brought up. President Trump saying they will be discussed, but I've got to let Ukraine make that decision. And I think they'll make a proper decision. But for President Trump to say publicly in these last couple of days that he looks forward to this next step, a summit that would include Vladimir Putin and President Zelensky of Ukraine, would at least make you think that President Trump thinks going into this, there is room for some ground to be made here.
Yeah, it certainly seems that he is trying to lay the groundwork today for another meeting. He has said that that's really the one that matters. And remember, the president all along was pushing for a trilateral meeting. He wanted to sit down with both of them. Vladimir Putin nixed that idea. So the president then going ahead with this meeting just with the Russian president. But he has said that if this meeting goes well today, that he wants to very quickly get Putin and Zelensky in a room together. He even floated the possibility of bringing Zelensky here to Alaska. He wants to move quickly. And I certainly think it was welcome news for the Ukrainians and for President Zelensky to hear President Trump aboard Air Force One today saying that those details, what an exchange of territory would look like, what that land swap would entail, that's going to be up to Ukraine. So the president telegraphing that he is here to try and take that initial step to really try and get these two leaders to the same table. Ukraine has said, though, for that to happen, they need that ceasefire first. And the President Trump, is certainly hoping for that as well, we know.
And we know that that's his primary hope coming out of this summit. He's been very public about that, very honest about that, and also quite honest about the chance that might not happen and what he would do if that's the case. Mary, stick with us here. We have a cleaner feed, if you will, of the images of the two leaders meeting, preparing to begin this summit. We can show you inside the room moments ago. As you can see, President Trump right there next to Vladimir Putin for a photo op. On each side are the members of the delegations that will be in the room with them. We know that Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister for more than 2 decades, will be in the room along with Vladimir Putin. Also, Yuri Ushakov, Putin's top foreign advisor, former Soviet diplomat. He was the Russian ambassador to the U.S. From 98 until 2008. They'll be there with Vladimir Putin. We know Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be there along with President Trump. There were a couple of feeds that came from the White House press pool, as we call it, of this particular moment. The other feed actually had some audio of reporters asking Vladimir Putin, will you commit to a ceasefire? Will you stop killing of civilians, make sure that there is a halt to any killing of civilians? Obviously, Vladimir Putin did not engage. The moment we can play you that audio, they'll let me know in my ear and we'll play it for you. But Jonathan Karl, our chief Washington correspondent, watching these images play out. John, you saw the warm reception on the red carpet. As you point out, President Trump and his team at the White House have made it very clear that they believe up until now nothing else has worked. And so, as you alluded to earlier, this is sort of the home field advantage. That's the way President Trump sees this. The red carpet, American soil, riding in the beast, and the presidential motorcade. Vladimir Putin appeared very happy with that as well, smiling through those windows. The hard part, though, John, is what comes next.
Absolutely. And look, Donald Trump has never been reluctant to embrace even pariah dictators around the world. The embrace of Kim Jong-un, the embrace of Vladimir Putin, the embrace of Hungary's President Orban, the former president of Brazil, the former president of the Philippines. He is very comfortable being face to face, arm in arm, smile to smile with people that are seen by much of the rest of the world as strongmen dictators. There's a very interesting moment, David, before this arrival, and that was the arrival of Sergei Lavrov, who, as you mentioned, will be in the meeting. The longtime Russian foreign minister arrived in Alaska wearing a sweatshirt that had the initials of the USSR, or CCCP in Russian, emblazoned upon the front of his sweatshirt. This is significant because Vladimir Putin called the breakup of the USSR, the former Soviet Union, one of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century. Russia was just one of 15 nation states within the Soviet Union. And Vladimir Putin sees a country like Ukraine, which was one of the member states of the USSR, of the Soviet Union, as effectively Russian territory. Not just the East, not just what the negotiations are theoretically going to be about now, but the entirety of Ukraine. And by the way, the fear in Europe is that Putin sees much of the rest of what was the Soviet Union the same way. This is why Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, the other republics, former republics of the Soviet Union, are so fearful of what is happening in Ukraine. They fear that if Putin gets away with what he's done in Ukraine, he won't stop with Ukraine.
John, as you know, on Air Force One on the way to Anchorage, President Trump was asked, what will make success of this summit today? As we look at these initial pictures of the two leaders meeting, Vladimir Putin being greeted there in Anchorage, I want to let our viewers at home listen in to that moment on Air Force One when the president was asked, how will you call this summit a success? What do you expect out of it in order to consider it a success on the backside? And here's what the president said a short time ago.
I can't tell you that. I don't know. There's nothing set in stone. I want certain things. I want to see a ceasefire. This is not to do with Europe. Europe's not telling me what to do. But they're going to be involved in the process, obviously, as will Zelensky. But I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today. Everyone said it can't be today, but I'm just saying I want the killing to stop. I'm in this to stop the killing. We're not putting up any money. We're making money. They're buying our weapons, and we're sending them to NATO, and NATO's sending us big, beautiful checks. But I don't care about that. I care about, it was a big factor when Biden spent $350 billion and got nothing. But what I do care about is they lost last week, 7,011 people were lost, almost all soldiers. 36 people in a town which got hit by a missile. But over 7,000 soldiers. It's crazy.
That's President Trump on Air Force One on the way to Anchorage, Alaska, when asked, how will you deem this a success? He said, I simply do not know at this point. We'll see what comes of this. Obviously, the president has said going into the summit, though, that he wants a ceasefire, he wants it rapidly, and that he would like it today. Said he would not be happy if he comes out of this summit without a ceasefire. I want to bring in Retired Colonel Steve Ganyard, ABC News analyst and consultant. And Steve, you and I were talking before we came on the air here just about where Ukraine stands right now. He joins us from our Washington bureau. And Steve, you've got the map of where Ukraine was before the war and where it stands now after the invasion. Just bring our viewers at home up to speed on how much of the land there in the east that the Russians now control.
Yeah, David, this is a map that shows 3.5 years ago, where you see here's the totality of Ukraine, here are the small areas that were owned by partisan separatists in Crimea and this part of the Donbass. Let's move forward to today. We see the region here, it's about 20% of Ukraine that the Russians have taken control of. So this is the front line here that delineates where the fighting is occurring. You can see that here what we have is Russians controlling this part of eastern Ukraine. And if we look about here, we can see what the Russians actually want. We know that Putin has come into these negotiations and he has said, I want the rest of Donetsk. I want to be able to say, this part is mine that I don't own. This part of Zaporizhia I want. I want this down at Kherson. But the real goal is to get the rest of the Donbass here. Why? Because it's a rich agricultural area. It's where the majority of industrial production comes from. And underneath the ground, there is critical minerals like titanium and lithium and coal. And so this is the consolation prize. There's no way that Ukraine can accede to this kind of releasing this much territory to Putin. So as the president has said, he's not going to negotiate today on who gets what. But this is what the expectation is that Putin is going to ask for. It will be a very difficult negotiation because neither Putin can show much leeway and Zelensky cannot afford to give up this much of Ukrainian territory.
That's really the rub here. Look at how significant that area is in the eastern part of Ukraine. Steve, leave those circles right up there, actually, if you want to throw them back up, because they're super helpful for our audience.
Okay.
You know, in the east right there, right behind Steve, anywhere where there are stripes along that eastern region of Ukraine, that's where Russia has made significant advances since this invasion. And Steve, all those circles that you've just put back on the map, as Steve points out, that's what they want in addition to the area where they have made strategic advances. Reuters and other agencies estimate up to 20% of Ukraine is now in Russia's hands. And Steve, this is going to be the central question of these discussions. Even if they get the ceasefire today, then you're going to get, you know, Trump would like to get both Zelensky and Putin together at a table, perhaps with President Trump as well, to talk about how to divvy up this land. It's pretty hard to imagine Russia agreeing to give up their desire here and Ukraine agreeing to give up any land that was rightfully theirs before this invasion began.
Yeah, very difficult, and that's where the negotiations are going to get drawn out. It's going to take months for them to come. They may get a ceasefire. Perhaps President Trump will get the next step, which is to get Zelensky to the table. There may be a ceasefire, but a permanent ceasefire is going to take months to negotiate. David, this front line is about 600 miles, so that's roughly the distance between, say, Atlanta and Miami. That gives you an idea of how long this is. This 20% of Ukraine that the Russians have taken over, as you note, over 200,000 dead. That's what Mr. Putin has to show, 20% of Ukraine for more than 1 million casualties on both sides.
Incredible toll on both sides, civilians lost. And you think about the families, and we've seen the pictures both in Ukraine and in Russia of families laying loved ones to rest who fought on both sides of this war. Steve Gagnon, our thanks to you. Let's go back to these pictures from just moments ago as we wrap up this part of our live coverage today. Again, President Trump in Anchorage, Alaska, arriving before Vladimir Putin, then greeting the Russian leader when he arrived on the red carpet there, saluting obviously the troops, but also giving a very warm welcome to Vladimir Putin after they had that photo op there on the stage of Alaska 2025 there. We then watched as President Trump invited Vladimir Putin. Certainly this wasn't a surprise to the White House team. This was all been planned out. Invited him in the presidential motorcade, the Beast, as we call it, to ride together to this summit. We saw those moments when Vladimir Putin waved through the window of the presidential motorcade, smiling, at least for this chapter and in this moment. It would seem this is what Vladimir Putin wanted, to be invited to American soil, something that we have not seen in more than a decade, a meeting of this magnitude, a summit, and there you see it. Vladimir Putin smiling inside the motorcade. President Trump leading into this saying there's a 25% chance that this could fail, but he's made it very clear that what he wants is a ceasefire. President Trump would like to then broker a second summit where he has both Vladimir Putin and President Zelensky at the table. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live, abcnews.com. I'll be back with a special edition of World News Tonight, and then we'll be coming on the air live coverage here on ABC of the joint press conference with President Trump, Vladimir Putin, and reporters from all over the world asking how it went. I'll see you then. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.